on page 66, and on page 66, it's just the daily evening service, the Mariv service, and after that we will turn to the reading of the Megillah, but you don't need to arm yourself with Megillat Esther at this stage, nor do you need your Grega yet, unless you wish to drown me out. My name is Hammond, not Haman. Thank you. On page 66. V'hu rachum yechaper avon v'lo yashchit. V'hi rabah l'chashiv apo v'lo ya'ir kol chamato. Being merciful, God forgives sin and does not destroy. Many times God turns rage aside and does not rouse the divine anger. Would you please stand? Baruchu et Adonai Hamevorach. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. On page 67. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro mariv aravim, b'chochma poteach she'arim u'vitmuna meshane etim, u'mechalif et hazmanim u'mesader et hakochavim b'mishmerotehem barkiach kirtzono, borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or. Hama'avir yom u'mevi layla, u'mavdil ben yom u'ven layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo, Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv aravim. With everlasting love, please join me, you have loved your people, the family of Israel. Teaching and practice, duty and justice, these you have taught us. Therefore, our God and guide, we think upon all this before we sleep and when we wake, and rejoice and delight in your teaching and its practice forever and ever, for they are our life and the measure of our days. We keep them in mind both day and night. Never take your love away from us. Blessed are you, God, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev et amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuto Leolam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha, v'shenantam levanecha v'dibarta bam, b'shiftecha b'vetecha u'vlechtecha v'derech, u'v'shochbecha v'kumecha, u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha, v'hayu l'totafot beinenecha, uchtavtam al muzuzot betecha u'visharecha. We continue in silence, reading the second and third paragraphs or in our own meditations. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם עשו לכם ציצית כערבי בידי רבנות למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. אמת ואמונה כל זאת וקיים עלינו, כי הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואין זולתו, ואנחנו ישראל עמו. העושה גדולות עד אין חקר ונפלאות עד אין מספר. וראו בניו גבורתו, שיבחו וחודו לשמו ומלכותו, ברצון קיבלו עליהם. משה ומרים ובני ישראל לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה, ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך, מי כמוך, באלים אדוני. מי כמוך, מי כמוך, נדב. נורא תהילו, עושה פלא. מלכות אדוני אלוהינו ראו בניך על הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, כיפדה אדוני את יעקב, וגלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל. In English, source of our life and our sovereign. Cause us to lie down in peace and to rise again to enjoy life. Spread over us the covering of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel and save us for the sake of your name. Be a shield about us, turning away every enemy, disease, violence, hunger, and sorrow. Remove the temptation that awaits us and the guilt that lies behind us. Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you are a God who guards and protects us, a ruler of mercy and compassion. Guard us when we go out and when we come in, to enjoy life and peace both now and forever. Baruch atah Adonai, shomer amo Yisrael la'ad. Blessed are you, God, guarding your people Israel forever. Blessed be God by day, blessed be God by night. Blessed be God when we lie down, blessed be God when we rise up. For in your hands are the souls of the living and the dead. In God's hand is the soul of every creature and the soul of human flesh. Within God's hand I lay my soul. You have redeemed me, eternal God of truth. Our God who is in heaven, reveal your unity, establish your kingdom for all time, and rule over us forever and ever. And now if you can, please stand for the Amidah. Begins on the next page, 74. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el hagadol hagibor v'hanora el elyon. Gomel chasadim tovim konei hakol, v'zocher chazdei avot ve'imahot. Umevi goel livnei v'neihem l'ma'an shemo be'arava. Melech ozer u'moshia u'magen. Baruch atah Adonai, magen Avraham poked Sarah. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב לחושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה. Matzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman ata l'chachayot metim, Baruch ata Adonai mechayeh hametim. At the bottom of page 76, Ata Kadosh, V'shimcha Kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalilucha sela, Baruch Ata Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. You favor human beings with knowledge and teach mortals understanding. Favor us with the knowledge, understanding, and discernment that come from you. Baruch Ata Adonai, Honein Hada'at. Turn us back to your teaching, our Creator, and draw us near to your service, our Sovereign. Bring us back in perfect repentance to your presence. Baruch Ata Adonai, Harotzei B'tshuva. Forgive us, our Creator, for we have sinned. Pardon us, our Sovereign, for we have disobeyed. For you are a God who is good and forgiving. Baruch Ata Adonai, Chanun Rabbe Lisloach. Look upon our affliction and defend our cause and rescue us quickly for the sake of your name. For you are a mighty Redeemer. Baruch Ata Adonai, Goel Yisrael. Heal us, God, and we shall be healed. Save us, and we shall be saved. For it is you we praise. Send relief and healing for all our diseases, our sufferings, and our wounds. Baruch Ata Adonai, Rofei HaCholim. Barech Elenu, bless this year, our living God, and may all that it brings be good for us. Send dew and rain as a blessing over the face of the earth. Bring life-giving water to all the earth. Satisfy all the world with your goodness, and bless our years as good years. Baruch Ata Adonai, Mevarech Hashanim. Sound the great horn for our freedom and raise a banner to restore all of us who experience exile. May the voice of liberty and freedom be heard throughout the four corners of the earth for all its inhabitants, for you are a God who redeems and rescues. Baruch Ata Adonai, Mekayem Nidache Amo Yisrael. Restore your judgment of righteousness in the world. Turn away from us sorrow and pain. Rule over us with love and mercy, and judge us with righteousness. Baruch Ata Adonai, Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. And for slander let there be no hope, and may all evil come to nothing, and remove the reign of violence and terror speedily in our days. Baruch Ata Adonai, Hama'avir Risha min ha'aretz. To the righteous, the pious, and the honest, to those who join us in righteousness, and to us ourselves, be merciful, our living God. Grant a good reward to all who sincerely trust in you. Baruch Ata Adonai, Mishan u'miftach latzadikim. Turn in mercy to Jerusalem, and may your presence dwell within it. Rebuild it as you have prophesied. Then it shall indeed be called City of Righteousness, Faithful City. Help us establish it as a place worthy of prayer for all peoples. Baruch Ata Adonai, Bonei Yerushalayim. Bring forth soon a new flowering from your servant David, a flowering of righteousness and a doorway of hope, for we wait and work for your salvation. Baruch Ata Adonai, Matzmiach Keren Yeshua. Shema Kolenu, hear our voice, our living God, source of mercy. Spare us and have pity on us, and receive our prayer with love and favor. For you are a God who listens to our prayers and needs. Our Sovereign, do not turn us away empty from your presence, for you hear the prayers of all lips. Baruch Ata Adonai, Shomea Tefillah. Our living God, be pleased with your people Israel, and listen to their prayers. In your great mercy, delight in us, so that your presence may rest upon Zion. Our eyes look forward to your return to Zion in mercy. Blessed are you, God, ever restoring your presence to Zion. Please join me. We declare with gratitude that you are our God and the God of our ancestors. You are our rock, the rock of our life, and the shield that saves us. In every generation we thank you and recount your praise for our lives held in your hand, for our souls that are in your care, and for the signs of your presence that are with us every day. At every moment, at evening, morning, and noon, we experience your wonders and your goodness. You are goodness itself, for your mercy has no end. You are mercy itself, for your love has no limit. Forever have we put our hope in you. And for all these things, may your name, our sovereign, be blessed, exalted, and honoured forever and ever. May every living being thank you. May they praise and bless your great name in truth, for you are the God who saves and helps us. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Over the page. Shalom Rav. 86. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amacha tasim leolam, ki ata hu melech adon v'chol hashalom. V'tov pe'enecha levarech et amacha Yisrael b'chol et u'v'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, hamavarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. And at the bottom of the page, may the maker of peace in the highest bring this peace upon us and upon all Israel and upon all the world. And let us say, Amen. Now, I think it's time for you to sit and for us to turn to the Megillah essay. And the Megillah, the word Megillah, actually, people just refer to the Megillah. And they are referring usually then to the book of Esther. And there is a lovely expression which I like, which is the ganze Megillah. That's when you do the whole thing. Okay, well, I'm sorry if I'm going to disappoint you, but we are sort of going to do the ganze Megillah, but we're not going to do all of the Megillah. Work that one out. Purim is like that. It's full of paradoxes. It's a slightly abbreviated one you have. But for those of you who are purists and who are quick readers and would like, could I ask please the Horowitz, they were insisting on singing the whole Megillah to us. I said, no, it's not fair. You've done enough as it is. So I don't know, I think perhaps you might need to come sort of down here. So if I'm going to put the gentleman at the beginning, which is where the trouble starts. And I'm going to let, I'm going to, it's not quite as, it's nothing at all. Look, it's nothing. And this is where everything's all right here. All right? By the time we get to Judith, everything's all right. And, well, I'll quickly run through this. Oh yes, sorry. It's just as well nobody can hear me because I'm talking nonsense. Well, I was going to try and read it. It was in the days of Ahasuerus. I tell you what, you've got it in front of you. Here we are. No, that's it. I'm going to... That's enough. No, that's it. I'm pictures to go with. You will have noticed this.
The names.
Yes, what are they, Ella?
The names of the children of Haman.
The names of the children of Haman. And it is traditional to read all of those in one breath. All right? So when we get to it, I'm going to try and do that, and you're going to have to try and do it with me. I'm going to do it in English, by the way, unless somebody would prefer to do it in Aramaic or Greek. We're going to do it in English. Thank you very much. So if you also make sure you've got with you a grega. It's a Yiddish word. It means a rat. All right. Now, what is the grega there for? Thank you. What is the grega there for? Why do we have them? To drown out the name of God. Right, this morning we read that we had to not forget to wipe out the name of Amalek. Haman, the rabbis understand. I'm going to do a quick portrait. Amalek received his descendant. Haman received his descendant. And so when you hear the name Haman, Haman, and hear the name Mordecai, and when you hear the name Esther, and when you hear the name Jeremiah, just making sure you were listening. If you do hear the name Jeremiah, would you please let me know? So, yes, the wrong Megillah. We will begin, though, with... We have in here the lesson before the beginning. Oh, yes. Page 7. Page 7. Oh, yes. Page 7. Yes. All right. So, let us say together. Page 7. The first. There are three. I should have one. Do you want me to sing as well? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim la'avotenu bayamim hahen uvazman hazeh, who did wonderful things for our ancestors in those days at this season. And finally, because here we are, we've made it round to Purim again, we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Right, now I'm going to stick over here, because otherwise, thank you very much. So, you have to be very careful, because the Megillah is very confusing, and it's not unusual when the names start getting close together. You find that you're drowning out the name of Mordecai and Esther as well as the name of Haman. And those cunning rabbis of ancient times probably understood that, because that is part of the confusion. Because by the time you go home tonight, you should all be incapable of driving cars. You should be so inebriated, and that includes the very small ones among us as well, because it's Purim, everything's permitted, that you cannot tell the difference between blessed be Mordecai and cursed be Haman. Well, at the moment, you can still tell the difference. Let's see what happens. Now, I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible. And off we go. Page 9 is the first page. Vayihi b'yemei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh hamelech, and this happened during the days of King Achashverosh, probably Xerxes, who ruled 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia. At the time that King Achashverosh ruled over the kingdom from the capital Shushan, the fortress Ba'ir. In the third year of his rule, he made a feast for all of his princes, advisors, and army officers, and at that party, the king showed off his great riches and the glory of his kingdom. This grand celebration lasted for 180 days. Don't make parties like that anymore. When the celebration was over, the king made another feast for the people of Shushan, great and small. I'm only doing my duty. It's a mitzvah. Look, we're never going to get to the end at this rate, are we? This feast took place in the court, in the garden of the king's palace. Now, the palace was decorated with white, green, and blue curtains tied with ribbons, and you don't need to know all of this. But what's interesting is it sounds a little bit like the ornaments for the Mishkan, which we read in Bible. A lot of the words overlap, not all of them. Queen Vashti Queen Vashti, now, I don't know whether we should, what we should do with Queen Vashti, but pay attention to Queen Vashti. She's really important. Also made a feast for the women. This celebration took place at the palace of King Ahasuerus. And on the 7th day of the feast, when the king was a bit drunk with wine and whiskey, he commanded his 7 closest servants, the eunuchs, and you must remember these names, it's very important. Even if you forget the names of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you must remember Mehuman, Bitseta, Habona, Bikta, Abata, Zeta, and Sarkarkas. Very important characters. To bring Queen Vashti dressed in her royal crown so that the people could see how beautiful she was. Children, close your ears. The rabbis did suggest that when it says that she was wearing her crown, it suggests that she wasn't wearing anything else. Bring the queen wearing her crown. You know what rabbis are like, they're very literal. All right. Queen Vashti refused to parade before the drunken guests. This refusal made the king very angry. The angry king called a meeting of his experts on Persian law. The experts were, they will remember these as well, all right? They were tested at the end. Karshena Shata'at Mata Karhashish Meres Marsana Memuchan. 7 of the most important princes of Persia and Media. And he asked what should he do to Queen Vashti, who disobeyed him. Memuchan answered on behalf of the others. Not only has Queen Vashti disobeyed the king, but she has also offended all the princes and people in every one of the king's provinces. For the news of her behavior will spread throughout the kingdom, and all the women will join her in disobeying their husbands. They will say, the king commanded Queen Vashti to appear before him, and she refused to come. At this moment, the wives of the princes of Persia and Media are answering their husbands the same way Vashti answered you. That kind of attitude will cause family dissension. If the king agrees, let him issue a royal order, a Persian decree that can never be changed. This is an important theme in this story. When a decree goes out from the king, he cannot rescind it. Send Vashti into exile and choose a new queen to replace her. So, when the king's decision was publicized on social media and everywhere else, wives throughout the kingdom will not rebel against their husbands and will treat them with more respect. And I think that's true, don't you? Men agree? Yes, I mean, it's got to be done, hasn't it? You can't let them get away with that. I mean, if you're asking your wife to dance wearing only a crown in front of your friends, and she doesn't, I mean, where will it end? So the king and his advisors were pleased with the suggestion. So Ahasuerus followed Menuchan's advice. The king sent orders to every one of his provinces, each in its language and script. This is a very diverse, serious moment here. This is a very diverse kingdom in which lots of people in different languages with different religious orientations lived in a great harmonious empire. It was very powerful. The king sent orders to every one of his provinces, each in its language and script, directing that all husbands were to be masters in their home. I think the story could end there, really, don't you? Sometime later, however, when King Ahasuerus calmed down, he realized how severely Vashti had been punished in relation to what she had done. He's just like the king of Israel, the God of Israel. He gets angry and then he feels sorry for the people he's been angry for who've sinned. You can't run a world and you can't run a kingdom like that. He'll learn. He realized how severely Vashti had been punished in relation to what she'd done. To quiet him, his advisors suggested, let us search for the most beautiful girls in the kingdom. That'll cheer him up. Let the king send beauty scouts throughout the kingdom who will bring pretty unmarried girls, Betulot, to the king's harem in Shushan, to Hegai, the harem keeper, who will dress them in royal clothing and beautify them. And the girl whom the king chooses will become queen in place of Vashti. And this plan pleased the king, and he approved of it. There was a Jew in Shushan named Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite. Mordecai had been... carried into exile from Jerusalem with the captives who were exiled with Jeconiah, the king of Judah, by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Babylonian exile. Mordechai raised Hadassah. Hadassah? Yes, whose Hebrew name was Esther. Actually, what's interesting is her Hebrew name was Hadassah and her Babylonian name was Esther. Already the book is turning us on its head. His Hadassah, whose Hebrew name was Esther, his cousin, for she had no father and mother, Mordecai adopted beautiful Esther as his own daughter. When the king's order was publicized, many beautiful young girls were brought to the king's harem in Shushan and placed under the care of Haggai, the keeper of the harem, and she made an excellent impression upon Haggai. So he rushed her beauty treatment and gave her 7 servants and the best apartments in the harem. Esther followed Mordecai's instruction and told no one that she was Jewish. Meanwhile, Mordecai was worried about Esther. Each day he stationed himself near the harem to find out what was happening to her. Well, we know what was happening to her, don't we? But never mind, he didn't know. Before the girls were paraded before King Ahasuerus, they were given a full year of beauty treatments. Wow. So you see, Esther's quite happy to be prettied up to meet the king, but Vashti wasn't going to be messed around with. Who's the heroine? Well, I leave it to you to think about. Before the girls were paraded before King Ahasuerus, they were given a full year of beauty treatments. The girl who came before the king was dressed in special clothing and jewels. She was brought to the king in the evening, and in the morning was placed in the second harem where the king's wives lived. The second harem was in the charge of Shashgaz. That girl never saw the king again unless he wished for her and especially called her by name. She couldn't just rock up in the king's bedroom. She had to wait to be called. When Esther's turn came, she asked for nothing special except what Haggai, the keeper of the harem, had advised. Everyone in the harem was dazzled by Esther. And Esther was brought to King Ahasuerus to his palace in the 10th month, the month of Tevet, in the 7th year of his reign. Why do we need to know that? I don't know. The king loved Esther more than anyone, and he crowned her queen in place of Vashti. The king made a great feast. Oh dear. Oh dear, dear, dear. Back to the harem. Okay, I've lost it now. Yes, the king made great feast for all his princes and advisors in honor of Esther. Ahasuerus distributed numerous gifts, cancelled many taxes. You can cheer at that. Cancelled many taxes. Yeah, right. Yeah. When the beautiful girls were assembled for the second time, Mordecai was sitting near the king's gate. She didn't tell anyone that she was Jewish, even though she was a queen. Esther continued to follow Mordecai's instructions. In other words, she was obeying orders from Mordecai and not just the king. All right. One day, now this is crucial, as Mordecai was sitting at the palace gate, 2 rebellious officers, Bigtan and Teresh, now, were they mentioned before? Do you remember? You've forgotten. So have I. Bigtan and Teresh were plotting to kill the king. Mordecai got wind of the plot, told Esther about the plot, and Esther immediately told the king in Mordecai's name. The plotters were questioned, they confessed, they were executed, and details of this incident were officially recorded in the king's historical records. Important fact, you could easily pass over it and not realize, very important, because we're going to come back to that. Sometime later, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, to prime minister. It's amazing who becomes prime minister in Persia. the king ordered everyone to honor and bow down to Haman, and everyone bowed down except Mordecai. Yay. The king's servants asked Mordecai, aren't you afraid to disobey the king's order? This is the beginning of all the second disobedience. First disobedience, Vashti. Second disobedience, Mordecai. The day after day, the officials continued to warn him, but Mordecai still refused. Why did he not bow down in front of Haman? We're not told. They agitated Haman about Mordecai to see whether Mordecai the Jew would prevail. Haman was very furious because Mordecai the Jew, the only one who refused to bow down to him. When Haman learned that Mordecai was Jewish, he decided to punish him as well as all the Jews in the kingdom. Makes perfectly reasonable sense, isn't it? You know, you get one Jew annoys you, well, wipe out the lot. You know, it makes sense, doesn't it? That's what he decides to do. Ha, silly man. In the 12th year of the reign of Ahasuerus, in the month of Nisan, lots, which is Pur, which is where the name Purim comes from, were cast by Haman. So this is a way of finding an auspicious time by a pagan process which is not Jewish. So we name our Jewish festival Purim after the behavior of the pagans choosing an auspicious day by casting lots. Forbidden to Jews, but nevertheless Purim is the day we remember when it was good for the Jews. How much more muddled can this book get? So lots were cast by Haman to choose the day and the month for a pogrom. The month of Adar was chosen, and that's the month we're in now. Then Haman slyly said to Ahasuerus, there's a group of people scattered throughout your kingdom whose customs are different from everyone else's. We've just been told that this kingdom is made up of multiple people with their own languages and their own scripts, but he's just picked on one of them, the Jews, as being, it's interesting. It wouldn't happen today, would it? Okay, so these people, their customs are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It doesn't make any sense to tolerate them. I will be able to pay. Now, this is always look for the money. I will be able to pay the treasury 10,000 silver talents if you will issue a decree that they be destroyed. The king agreed. He wanted the money and spent it all on parties, hasn't he? Gave his signet ring to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, with which to seal and sign the order. The king said to Haman, actually, you can keep the money. You still have my permission to do anything you want with them. In the first month, on the 13th day, Haman dictated orders to all governors and princes, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. The order was written and sealed with the king's own signet ring. Runners carried the decree's extermination to all the provinces in the kingdom. All Jews were included in it, young and old. Children and women were to be killed on the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar and were to be plundered of all their possessions. Now, the date today, according to my luach, is, well, the day was yesterday really, was the 13th of Adar. All right? And now we're into the 14th because it's the evening. But I'm not sure whether this would have applied in Babylon. Okay. And so they're not only to be killed, but they're going to be plundered of all their possessions. Right. At the king's command, the runners raced away. The extermination order was first posted in Shushan, the capital. Then the king and Haman sat down to drink, while the city of Shushan fell into panic and confusion. chapter 4, we're nearly there, only another 6. When Mordecai became aware of all that had taken place, he went into mourning, tore his clothing, put on sackcloth, and began to weep and moan. No one in mourning was allowed in the king's palace. So Mordecai stood outside the palace gate. All the Jews throughout the kingdom were in mourning, fasting and weeping, and the Jews wore sackcloth and ashes in public, thereby declaring themselves. It's interesting. Are they hidden or are they revealed? Certainly when they start wearing the sackcloth and ashes, they're revealed. Esther was very distressed when her maids informed her that Mordecai was in sackcloth and ashes, so she sent new clothing to Mordecai, which he refused. Then Esther sent Hathach, whom the king had appointed to serve her, to find out what's the problem. Hathach found Mordecai outside the palace gate. Mordecai told Hathach about the extermination decree, about the money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasury for the right to destroy the Jews. Mordecai gave Hathach a copy of the decree and asked him to show it to Esther and to tell her to plead with the king to save her people from extermination. Hathach told Esther what Mordecai had said. Esther sent Hathach back to Mordecai with the following message. Everyone knows that anyone who comes into the king's presence without special invitation is put to death, unless the king holds out his golden scepter, and I have not seen the king in the last month. Hathach relayed Esther's message to Mordecai. Then Mordecai sent this answer to Esther. Do you, for 1 second, believe that just because you are a queen, you will escape the extermination decree? If you do not intervene, I'm positive that help for the Jews will come from somewhere else. Ah, that's interesting. What is he thinking of? Is that a veiled reference to God? Because there's nothing explicit in this book about God. But you and all your relatives will perish. I believe that you were specifically brought to this palace just for this emergency. Then Esther sent the message to Mordecai, gather together all the Jews in Shushan and fast for me for 3 days and 3 nights. I and my servants will also fast. In 3 days, I will visit the king unannounced. And if I die, I die. Crazy, isn't it? Crazy. Mordecai left and did exactly as Esther had told him to do. 3 days later, Esther entered the throne room dressed in her royal robes. When the king saw Esther, he held out his golden scepter and signaled her to approach. Esther approached and touched the tip of his scepter. I don't know what you're thinking. That rocker over there is... Then the king said to her, Queen Esther, tell me what's bothering you. Even if you ask for half my kingdom, it shall be yours. And Esther said, Your Majesty, if the king agrees, let him and Haman come to a banquet which I have prepared. So she's got the habit, hasn't she, of banquets herself. And then the king said to his aides, Hurry, bring Haman so we can attend Esther's banquet. The king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther prepared. As the king was drinking his wine, he said, Esther, tell me, what's troubling you? Even if you ask for half of my kingdom, it shall be granted. Then Esther answered and said, if the king is pleased with me, and if he... So you don't need that, no, not until you hear Haman. There you are, that's it. And if he wishes to grant my request, then let the king and Haman come to another banquet tomorrow, At this party, I will explain my problem. What is all this about? What's this party? You know, it doesn't make very much sense, does it? She just wants a party. I think she wants one last party before she dies. But it's probably what it is, yes. So Haman left Esther's banquet a very happy man. But then he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and his joy turned to anger because, as usual, Mordecai did not bow down to him. But Haman kept his composure and went home and sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. Haman boasted to them about his riches, his many children, and the honors which the king had bestowed upon him, and how he was now second to the king. That's what Joseph was once, do you remember? To Pharaoh. And Haman boasted, Queen Esther even invited King and I to a banquet in her palace, and tomorrow I will attend still another banquet in the palace. Ha ha! But these honors mean nothing to me when I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting in the gate of the king's palace. Then his wife Zeresh and his friends said to him, build a gallows 70 feet high. And in the, you see, the woman is always much more merciful and kind. It's the men who are vicious. Yes. Build a gallows 70 feet high, and in the morning ask the king to permit you to hang Mordecai from it. And then you will enjoy your banquet with the king and the queen. This advice made sense to Haman. And he ordered the gallows to be erected. You can't guess what's going to happen, can you? Did you read it last year? You know what's going to happen? I've forgotten. I'm waiting to see. All right. Chapter 6, nearly there. Only another 3. 4. That night the king couldn't sleep. Too much to drink, probably. And he decided to read the historical records of his kingdom. What is he going to find there? Aha! He read how Mordecai had discovered the assassination plot of, what was the name of those 2 people? Bigtana. Thank you. Yes, well, you've got it in front of you, haven't you? Yeah, you see. Cheating. And saved the king's life. And the king said, how have we rewarded Mordecai for saving my life? And the king's aides replied, nothing has been done for him. We haven't done anything. You know, it's the civil service never gets round to anything much. And the king continued, which of my officials are in the palace? Now Haman had just arrived to ask the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows he'd just built. Ha! He's going to walk into this one, isn't he? You can see it happening. And the king's servant said, Haman is in the palace. And the king said, bring him in immediately. And as Haman entered, the king said to him, what shall I do for a man whom I wish to honor? And Haman thought, I'm the most important man in the kingdom. Of course, the king wants to honor me. Haman replied, for the man whom the king wishes to honor, bring a royal robe which the king has worn, and a horse which the king has ridden, and place a royal crown on his head. And instruct one of your nobles to enrich the person whom the king wishes to honor, and lead him on your horse through Shushan, proclaiming, this is the way the king honors those who serve him well. Then the king said to Haman, hurry, take my royal robes and my horse, and do exactly as you have suggested to Mordecai, the Jew who now sits at the palace gates. And Haman robed Mordecai in the king's robes, mounted him on the king's horse, and led him through the streets of Shushan, shouting, this is the way the king rewards those he wishes to honor. Then Mordecai returned to his post at the palace gate, and Haman sadly and shamefully crept back to his house. Are you beginning to feel sorry for him? No. You are hard-hearted people. What happened to your Rachmin? I mean, where is it? Then When Haman told his wife Zeresh and his friends what had happened, they warned him, if Mordecai is a Jew, you will never defeat him once he's gotten the upper hand. In the end, you yourself will have a great fall. While they were talking, the king's guards arrived to escort him to Esther's banquet. Chapter 7. It's going faster now, isn't it? The king and Haman came to Queen Esther's banquet. Once again, the king asked Esther, what's your wish, Queen Esther? Even if you ask for one half of my kingdom, it shall be yours. Then Queen Esther answered, I found favor in the king's eyes. That is a phrase that's used in the Bible for if you please God, if you find favor in God's eyes. It's interesting. And this is the king. Something here about the nearest thing they can find to a king in Persia is, of course, the emperor himself. Okay, well, stop all of this. Whatever it is. Okay, the king and Haman came to Queen Esther's banquet. Once again, the king asked Esther, what is your wish? Half of the kingdom will be yours. Queen Esther answered, if I found favor in the king's eyes, and if it pleased the king, save my life and the lives of my people. For I and my people have been sold to those who wish to exterminate us. We have been sold as slaves. I would have remained silent, but this decree will create many problems for the king. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, who is this evil schemer and where is he? And Queen Esther said, there sits our enemy, wicked Haman. Haman trembled in terror before the king and queen. The king arose in anger and went into the garden for some air. Oh dear. He's a very delicate man. While Haman stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life, for he saw that his fate was sealed by the king. This reminds me of the other second man who came to be second in control of a big pagan state, Joseph. Remember what happened to Joseph? Remember how he got into prison? Right, watch this. Watch this. Whoever wrote this book of Esther was playing games with us, wasn't he? Oh, she. Okay. There he was. Haman stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. For he saw that his fate was sealed by the king. And when the king returned, he found Haman lying across the foot of Esther's couch, where he was reclining. The king roared, this evil man intends to rape my queen in my own palace right in front of my eyes. Never mind exterminating the Jews, he's after my wife. All right. As the king spoke, his guards covered Haman's head. Then Harbonah, one of the aides, said, Sire, the gallows which Haman has constructed for Mordecai stands in his courtyard. Hang Haman on his own gallows, ordered the king. So they hung. It should say hanged, by the way, bad English, hanged. So they hanged Haman on the gallows which he constructed for Mordecai, and the king's anger was cooled. Right, then it gets even more exciting. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Esther, the queen. Mordecai was brought before the king, for Esther had told the king what he was to her, i.e. her uncle, but actually her stepfather. The king gave his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther appointed Mordecai's supervisor in charge of Haman's estate. Got to watch, chase the money. You see where the money's going here. Haman, and then back to the king, and now it's going to Mordecai. There's a whole financial thing going on here. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Even in those days. Wouldn't happen today, of course. So once again, Esther came before the king and begged him to stop the extermination plot against the Jews. And the king raised his golden scepter, and Esther arose and stood before the king. Esther said, "If it pleases the king, and if you love me, send out a decree reversing Haman's order to exterminate the Jews in all the provinces of the king." Now you found yourself you were just booing when you heard reverse Haman's order to exterminate the Jews. And you found yourself booing because you heard the name Haman. And it completely covered over what was being said, if you think about it. It's subtle stuff, isn't it? It's really nasty, really. I don't know why we read this. Well, we only read it on Purim, that's the thing. All right. And the Jews in all the provinces of the king. "How can I look on while my people are being butchered?" Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "I have already given Haman's estate to Esther and have hanged him because he tried to destroy your people. Now I authorize you and Mordecai to issue new orders regarding the Jews and to seal your decree with my signet ring and in my name. For any decree with the king's name and sealed with the king's signet may not be revoked." Immediately the king's secretaries were summoned. And on the 23rd day of the month of Sivan, a decree dictated by Mordecai was sent to the Jews and the governors and princes of the provinces. From India to Ethiopia, 127 in all, this decree was written in many languages. It keeps saying that, it keeps reminding us that Jews are not the only minority here. Mordecai wrote the order in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring, and the order was carried by speedy riders on horses and camels and mules and motorbikes. And the king allowed the Jews to band together, to defend themselves, and to destroy those who would attack and rob them, also their children and their women, and to take their possessions. Why aren't you cheering? Mordecai's decree was to take effect on the 13th day of the month of Adar, when things should have gone the other way. The order was to be publicized to all the people in force in every province so that the Jews could avenge themselves against their enemies. Messengers rushed out on speedy horses at the king's command, and the decree was also published in the capital Shushan. And Mordecai left the king's presence dressed in royal blue and white robes, a golden crown and a cape of purple linen, while the city of Shushan celebrated joyfully. Now there was light and joy, gladness and honor for the Jews of Persia. In every city, as soon as the king's decree arrived, the Jews declared a holiday, filled with joy and gladness, and many of the people converted to Judaism. They came on Thursday evenings, mostly, at about 7 o'clock. And quite a number of Jews who'd never really bothered to have bar mitzvah or anything, forgotten everything, also came along and joined them. And they were a very, very important, good group. In fact, in the end, I think they outnumbered all the other Jews in Persia. So now there was light and joy. People had converted to Judaism since they didn't want to be harmed. You know, you've got to be very careful, you know, who you let into the conversion class. I'm going to have to talk to them when I see them on Thursday. I think so. Are you just here in order to escape trouble? Is that what it is? Because you're in the wrong place if you are. That's right. And on the 30th day of the 12th month, Adar, the day the enemies of the Jews had chosen for their extermination, the opposite happened, and now the Jews were victorious. The Jews, now you listen to this very carefully, don't forget the numbers. The Jews in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus gathered together to avenge themselves against their enemies, and no one opposed them because they were afraid. And all the government officials elevated the Jews to high office because they feared Mordecai. And Mordecai had much influence and power in the palace, and his fame was growing. And the Jews defeated all their foes by the sword, destroying their enemies. The Jews defeated their enemies and killed 500 enemies in Shushan. Okay. And you got to say this with me. And Pashandata and Daphon and Asparta and Porata, Adalia, Aridata, Pamashta, Arisai, Aridai, Vazaya. They killed the 10 sons of Haman, the sons of Hamedata, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not steal any of their property. Just killed them. That day the king learned how many people were killed in the capital of Shushan. Then the king said to Queen Esther, the Jews have killed 500 enemies and the 10 sons of Haman in the capital of Shushan alone. Just imagine what they've done in my other provinces. Now what else do you want? Tell me and I will do it. Wow. Then Esther said, if it pleases your majesty, allow the Jews in Shushan to do tomorrow what they did today, and let Haman's sons be hanged on the gallows as an object lesson for all to see. So I think they've already been killed. Now they're going to be hung up. You know, we used to do that in this country quite a lot. We used to cut people's heads off and put them on the bridges and things like that. It seemed to work. Things were so much quieter in those days. And the king commanded that it should be done, and the decree was issued in Shushan, and the 10 sons of Haman were hanged. And on the 14th day of Adar, the Jews in Shushan killed 300 more of their enemies, but they didn't steal any of their property. Very decent chaps. Meanwhile, the Jews in the other provinces gathered together to defend themselves against their enemies, and they killed, can you see what it says there? 75,000 of those who hated them, but they didn't steal any of their property. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, they rested. It was Shabbat. And on the 14th day, they celebrated their victory with feasting and joy. The Jews in Shushan assembled on the 13th and 14th days of the month, and on the 15th day, they celebrated their victory with feasting and joy. Therefore, the Jews who live in the villages celebrate the 14th day of Adar with joyous feasting and by exchanging gifts, shalach manot. Mordecai recorded these events. He sent letters to all the Jews near and far, to all the provinces of the king, urging them to celebrate the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar every year as a holiday, and that's where we are now. It was on those historic days that the Jews were saved from their enemies, and it was the month when their sorrow was changed to joy and their mourning to happiness, making them into days of feasting and joy and of exchanging gifts, shalach manot, and giving tzedakah to the poor. And they adopted Mordecai's suggestion and made it a yearly custom, because Haman, the son of Hammedat the Agagite, plotted to exterminate the Jews just by a throw of the dice. But when Queen Esther brought it to the king's attention, he issued an official decree that Haman's evil determination should be hung on his own head, and that he and his 10 sons should be hung. So today, we call this holiday Purim, because of the word pur, which means throwing the dice, because of the contents of the letter, and because of what happened to them. The Jews agreed to celebrate the holiday of Purim and pass it on to their children, and they also decided to observe these 2 days every year. And the days should be remembered and observed by each family in every generation, in every city and province, so that the memory of the days of Purim never cease among their descendants. That's a message that was quietly sent out to the liberal movement in this country, who tried to suppress it. Just a bit of religious propaganda, don't worry. The Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail and Mordecai, the Jew, wrote a second letter confirming the establishment of the holiday of Purim. They were obviously Orthodox, have to do everything twice. And he sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces with messages of goodwill and peace to confirm that they observe the days of Purim on the correct date as Mordecai. Why do they keep insisting this? Why do they keep insisting? We've heard it. How many times have we heard that they've agreed to do this on that date? What is that about? I don't understand. You can tell me. Including the rules for the fast and the Purim prayers. And Esther's decree officially confirmed the holiday of Purim in writing. So we finally have chapter 10, a nice little short one, and it goes, "And the king set a tax on his kingdom and the islands which belong to him. His mighty deeds on account of the greatness of Mordechai and the honor bestowed upon him by the king are all recorded in the history of the kings of Media and Persia. For Mordechai, the Jew, was second in power to King Ahasuerus. He was respected by the Jews and revered by great numbers of his countrymen. He constantly worked for the welfare of his people and for the goodwill of all their descendants." Chazak. I think that's the end, isn't it? Now, I think you should take it up with the Medes and the Persians. They'll give you a straight answer, I'm sure. Pardon? It's interesting, isn't it? I think there is some, and I'm not very good at this sort of stuff, and other people and other rabbis are very good at it, and so you should ask them and not me. But the celebration of these festivals sometimes is different in the capital cities than it was in the provinces. And, you know, the whole business of the calendar and one thing and another. But yes, I mean, it's true. They also mentioned the fasting, which corresponds to the fasting of 3 days, I think it was, wasn't it, before all of the thing blew up. And clearly there will have been, and there certainly will be, Jews who will fast at this time as well. Yeah. But there is something curiously subversive about this whole piece. I mean, the Hebrew Bible, when it was translated and used by non-Jews, especially by the Christians, they added prayers to make the Word of God appear in this book. But it's interesting that we've never done that, and it is a very good question. I mean, why? You know, how did it get into the Tanakh? You know, it raises so many questions. Especially, there is actually quite a theology running through it about the ruler and the king, which is a relationship which is much closer in ancient thinking than it is in our modern thinking, and indeed, of course, you know, the God of Israel is referred to as a sovereign and as a king and as a ruler and as a judge. All of those things that people like Ahasuerus or Xerxes were. And so the sort of visual image almost, the meaning of a God ruler was probably quite a secular thing. And if you consider how powerful Persia was, I mean, it was like, you know, the United States in its prime, or the Soviet Union for others, you know, it was a great kingdom. And we had been in there, hadn't we? I mean, that's why Mordecai was there. He was presumably left behind, like so many other Jews, in Babylon after the return to the land and the rebuilding of the temple. We know Jews stayed there, and they stayed there right through until, well, Saddam Hussein, really. Well, they were still there with Saddam Hussein to some extent. It was after that they went. The last remaining Jews in Iraq, which is Babylon. Yeah. Enough already. Now, what we have to do is we have to have a beauty parade. You are allowed to keep your clothes on. In fact, you must. And we're dividing it up into 2 age groups. Those who are over 90, no, those who are post-bar bat mitzvah, and those who are pre-bat bar mitzvah. So, I think we should give the little ones, you know, a moment in the sun. I mean, they can't. How can they compete with you? Perhaps they've had enough. It's usually in the form of a parade, and we have judges, but I don't know who the judge would be. And then there used to be prizes as well. But, you know, we don't do that anymore because it makes people feel inadequate, you know. But, yeah, come on, let's have... Can we see the young people in their those of you who are not yet bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah? Let's see you. We want to see your costumes because you've taken all this off. And I expect you'll probably have these costumes again tomorrow when you go to Chay. Come and stand here. Come on. I've got my costume on now. All right. All right. I'm a very, very little known post-impressionist painter. Right. Now, come on. You got to tell us. You are. Where are you post bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah? Okay. So you're an escort. You're pre. Okay. So please pay attention. Next to her, we have an alien. You're just a queen. You're nothing. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And then, well, I think all of those of you who are in costume, would you please make your way to the back there and walk away a little way around? Like shame the ones who are not in costume. Always have Andy, where is he? A vote has been taken, and we've decided that your fancy dress is the winner.
It's on the recount. It's on the second one. It's an outrage.
You're the first. Yes, I think that's the end.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I just say, I think we need a vote of thanks to Rabbi Tony. And if you haven't had enough of this, tomorrow there is more. So the Megilah is going to start. The Megilah is going to do their thing with Megilah from about 10 to 12, and then from 12 till 2, there will be a very nice
Can do it from here?
which will be followed by an absolutely super duper presentation by Megilah Reading, who's been practicing today all day, and it will be absolutely super. So please, no age limit, do come along as well.
It's 12:30. It's 12:30 to start. Children, yeah, 12:30. Yeah. 12:30. Yeah, 12:30 for the Purim.
And
12:30.
And
Ruth, come on. Come talk into the microphone.
Could you also please remember to check in Megilah because of the Purim Synagogue where we have got the charities at the... Well, just read it in Megilah.
And actually, can I just add to that? On the charity is called Merton Vision. So it's a local charity.
Sorry about that.
That's. Is that better? Just get my. It's a long time since I've had hair. So. And the charity is called Merton Vision. That's obviously a local charity that works to empower visually impaired people across the borough. I actually have a card reader with me, so I'll be standing in the foyer at the end of the service, and if anyone wants to donate, you can come and tap. And a final thank you to Lynn for an amazing Kiddush and keeping us topped up with whiskey, and to Michael, Miles and Barry for doing security.
And thank you all for cheering and booing and Gregory so consistently. Well, Gregory, yes. Did you enjoy it?